Good afternoon, everybody. It's really wonderful to be here with you. Welcome to Evie's Gardens, which is a commentary really on life in general, but on gardens in particular sometimes, although I haven't been outside as much lately. Or rather, I haven't been filming things outside for you, which I intend to do again, and I promise you I will. But also, I like to explore other topics here, and I'm in the process of getting some interviews lined up to maybe get some other people in the studio, which I think would be lovely. If you're new to this channel, my name is Evie Botelho. This is a sub-channel of the Peak Prosperity channel, which is a network that my partner and I have, Chris Martinson, and a part of our larger sort of suite of offerings, which we have a website called peakprosperity.com if you ever want to check that out. It's a great community, really, of people that are dedicated to making their lives more resilient, emotionally, physically, logistically, financially, and all the things. So I appreciate you joining me today, and I encourage you to go and check out that community if you feel called. The other thing is, of course, we're dealing with a world of censorship these days. And so if you would be so kind, if at the time that you get to the end of this video, you feel like subscribing to our channel or giving a thumbs up, that certainly will help the algorithms decide whether or not to serve this to other people. And so it's always appreciated when you do that. And I've done, a whole, probably a handful of these lives now just by myself, maybe like a dozen or so. And it still is hard each and every time. I notice myself getting really wound up. Of course, I have to run up and down the stairs, which is a couple flights when I forget things that I need. But so I was just doing that right before I said hello to you, and my heart's still pounding. But it's harder than it looks to be here holding space by myself, and it makes me appreciate all the people that do this every day and do a magnificent job sharing what they think and what they know with the world. And it certainly has turned into an interesting library of things. YouTube seems to be a place where you can get almost any information. Of course, it's hard to verify sometimes whether it's true or not, but it definitely is just a wonderful library is the best word I can think of for it at the moment, where people can put all their thoughts and their projects and how-tos, and it's so easy to get lost in that world sometimes. So welcome. I'm so glad to be spending another afternoon with you. It's been a couple of weeks. We've had a lot of things going on here. We're in full prep mode for our yearly summit, which is coming up September 13th through 15th. And then we also have, I think I've mentioned to those of you that have watched this before, Chris and I are getting married on the 5th of October here at our property. So if you can imagine, there's just a lot of stuff happening behind the scenes, and just so many decisions, and all good. But yeah, I'm such a country girl. I actually went to upstate New York to visit my friend Grace, who's a lovely human, and she was helping me to prepare in all sorts of spiritual and emotional and physical ways too. I had some girl time, went and got my hair cut, blah blah blah. And it's funny. I'm so not well versed in all things fashion and makeup and hair and products. I'm such a farm girl, and I feel like a total dork, but she was very graceful with me, as her name suggests, and was happy to pal along with me. And so actually today I tried out the makeup I'm going to wear that day, which I guess is a thing. You practice putting on the makeup. So I'm in the ritual of getting ready, and that's where my brain has been lately. But I missed you guys this last week, and anyway, in preparation for these talks with you, these chats, one of the things I always do is pray. And I pray every single time to be of service, and whatever needs to be said come through my heart, through my mind, and out my mouth to you to be shared on this World Wide Web. And so it feels important that I also let my mind go where it wants to go, but at the same time, I take it really seriously. And the things that I choose to talk about and to share with you are things that have come to me as sort of a, yeah, you need to bring this up or highlight that or share that. And sometimes it's pretty personal stuff, but I appreciate everybody that's been tuning in and watching and supportive and also giving me some good feedback about looking at the camera more, which is super helpful. Thank you. It's difficult to be pointing your energy and attention at an inanimate object and having the kind of life about you that you would if you were talking with a person in real life. And I know you're a real person and I'm a real person over here, but what's in between us feels awkward for me. So I'm learning how to do it and do it better. And I certainly appreciate your feedback. I'm looking forward to growing this this little sub channel and to just creating a tribe all on our own of people that can converse together, whether in the comments section or, you know, in the chat during this time that we have together. I would love for you to get to know each other as well as me. And I am doing what I can to share parts of our life with you. So I wanted to offer a quote to start us out today. And it just, I've read it before in one of our lives. Chris and I also do them together for our subscribers, but there was a quote that really touched me, and it's by this man named Francis Weller. And he says, "We were not meant to live shallow lives, pocked by meaningless routines and the secondary satisfactions of happy hour. We are the inheritors of an amazing lineage, rippling with the memories of life lived intimately with bison and gazelle, raven and the night sky. We are designed to encounter this life with amazement and with wonder, not resignation and endurance. This is at the very heart of our grief and sorrow. The dream of full-throated living, woven into our very being, has often been forgotten and neglected, replaced by societal fiction of productivity and material gain. No wonder we seek distractions. Every sorrow we carry extends from the absence of what we require to stay engaged in this one wild and precious life." Chris and I often say, when we're talking to each other, just sort of jokingly, like, what are you going to do with your one wild and precious life? And we'll sort of, you know, bat that back and forth to each other when we have decisions that need to be made or depending on what's going on. But it's such a potent statement, isn't it? What are you going to do with your one wild and precious life? And what is it you require to stay engaged with that life? You know, what are the things that are going to drive you to be able to get up every day and do what needs doing in order to enact that dream or that place that you want to end up? Such a good question. Personally, I feel like I have a desire that's really strong, and I don't know if anybody on here can relate to this, but I have a desire to really sense the divine in things. I'm very much drawn to like the meaning of life, and it could be my birth chart. It could be because I'm a Sagittarius. I don't know. I was born on the equinox. I don't know. But it's, I feel like I always want to be bringing a sense making or some kind of meaning into whatever we're doing every day. And I need to do it for my own heart and my own being and how I show up in the world. But I also feel like it's an important thing to draw attention to in case there are other people that could also benefit from that grounding. And I don't have all the answers by any means. And I am just here as an example of somebody who is struggling and learning and doing their best along the way. And I feel like I'm always appreciative when other people bring my attention to something I didn't think about or I hadn't realized. And so I'm hoping that this podcast can do that, and in particular this podcast today. And so I feel like it's also important to talk about the things I want to discuss today, which is about beauty and about grief and about the meaning of life, because I know there are so many younger people that are feeling incredibly demoralized at this time, especially in the West, and here in the United States. Our culture doesn't really ask much of us in certain ways, and then it asks everything of us in others. And it's just, a meaningless sort of dirge that we're asked to walk, and we walk it beside each other, kind of half awake or half asleep. And there are lots of wonderful things to celebrate in life, right? There's relationships and all sorts of different types of friendships, and life events, and spiritual birthdays, and physical birthdays, and children being born, and grandchildren, and, the joy of family coming together. Like, and all the accomplishments, right? So many things. And yet I feel like more than ever, people feel really empty, and our young people are feeling lost, and our young people are feeling really disconnected from what I think could give their life deep meaning. And unfortunately, they're plugged in, but they're not plugged in. And I think they're onto something. I think that there is something going on in our culture that we all need to kind of talk about in terms of what we're passing down to them, the world we're leaving behind, the resources we've already depleted, and what that means for the next generations. Chris was just telling me about something which I'm sure he'll expand on in a future podcast himself, but it was about how schools are essentially, like, people are financing and scamming, and we're going to end up leaving our children with a lot of debt in this country. And it's just a fact. And I worry about my children after I'm gone. I worry that if for some reason the United States is asked to, pay all that debt, that we can't, and we're going to become debt slaves to other countries. And that's a really scary thing to think about. And yet it's here we are. We can't escape it. So what are we going to do about it? And that's where I try to remember to bring myself, because sometimes I work so hard to find a solution to something because I'm uncomfortable with the feelings underneath. You know what I mean? Like, I am struggling with feeling a sense of loss, or with what I'm leaving behind for my kids. So I'm like, all right, let's see what we can accumulate today that's going to hold its value for tomorrow. It's like, okay, like that might help a little bit, right? Like, maybe I'll buy some silver and it'll make me feel better. But I really want to get out of that cycle that I get into sometimes about reaction that's not based on physical need, but an emotional place inside that I probably have neglected a little bit without meaning to. And my cue is when I start, going off on these random tangents in the form of activities to try and quell that anxiety. And instead, I think what I need to do is just maybe light a candle, sit there out by the fire, something like that, and just let myself cry and be with grief and just be with what is, instead of trying to fix it or change it. And I think I'll talk more about that later on in this podcast, but I really think that one of the things we're asked to do is to be witness to what's going on, to be faithful witness to each other, to our children and their experiences, and not just our children, but all the children, all the people around us as well. It doesn't have to be a pretty picture for it to be beautiful, if that makes sense. And so anyhow, so the way that I see things, the desire to find God or the divine in things, I've always been like that ever since I was a little girl. I was a peacemaker in my family. I just was deeply sensitive to everything going on around me, and part of that I think is because I'm a musician as well. So I play the violin and I sing, and I learned how to feel the music and to channel what was going on inside me into those instruments, which was so helpful during some of the darker times in my life. But sometimes that sensitivity is hard. Sometimes I see more than I want to see accidentally, about people, about the land, from animals. Like, I just pick up on those things. I don't know if anybody else has that experience too, but as an empath, I just am deeply tuned to what's going on. And I think it's a good, it's just a type of person, right? We're all different, and we all have different gifts that we've been given to give to this world. And that happens to be mine. I'm the canary that's, fainting or dying because it's just too intense and too much. And my body tells me real quick when it doesn't like a situation. And I don't even have the ability sometimes to force mind over matter and just force myself into certain situations. Like, it just gives me such big warning signs. And I've learned to appreciate that, because that's a language all in itself. But I can see sometimes when people are getting stuck in their like cycles of wounding. I wouldn't call it like premonition. It's more of pattern recognition. And we have people we've known that just their life journey has taken them somewhere else. And often I've known way before we get the data about that happening that something's off and we're just not in alignment anymore. And it's so sad when it happens, but it's interesting to have that. And I'm now starting to see it as more of a gift, I guess. But I also feel like, in terms of being sensitive to environments, that our world is just not nourishing. You go to the strip mall in the middle of town, wherever you live, it's just ugly. All the buildings look the same. They're all made out of some nasty, ugly concrete. And it's not really built for beauty. It's built for, I don't know, it's just a warehouse, Target, Walmart, like all these things. They're not built to be something that we go into and feel inspired and nourished. And I mean, some of the older places, Chris and I are hoping maybe to get to go to Europe for our honeymoon. I don't know if it's going to happen because of everything going on in the world right now, excuse me. But we're hoping that perhaps we get a chance to go and see some of that older architecture, because they used to build with beauty in mind. It was just everywhere. It was so magnificent. These huge cathedrals and castles and things that have stood the test of time. Meanwhile, like in our town, we've got bridges and roads falling apart and no real money to repair all of that stuff. And it just makes you wonder about how they used to do those things without the technology we have now. But I think a part of the collective grief that we are feeling is because we're not building for beauty. We're not building for longevity and with the future in mind, and the people that are going to inherit the eyesores like Logan Airport in Boston. It's been the same my entire lifetime. 40 years of like completely run down, dirty, nasty. And from what I've heard, if you go out of the country, it actually looks different. And I think that's why people are so enchanted with some of those places, like that old world feel, the history that's in those structures, that's in that land, that's in the generations that have passed it down proudly to each other. You go to Italy or France, you feel a part of that. And I hope to see what that's like. I've never experienced it myself except for looking at pictures, but I do think that's an important consideration going forward, no matter what we're creating, whether it's a shed in our backyard or an addition on our house, like just to make it as beautiful as we can. And that's something I want to do for us, for sure. But today I really wanted to talk about something that's been on my heart. I mentioned it a couple of podcasts ago, and the subject I want to talk about is the monarch butterflies. We used to have so many of these creatures in our fields, and I remember seeing them in other places I've lived. Since we moved out here to Chester, since COVID, really, everything's been a little bit different. There haven't been as many monarchs at all, and seemingly less and less each year. And this year, neither Chris or I saw more than 2 adults the entire summer, which is just bizarre. And we leave the plants that they like to lay their eggs on and pupate and all that we leave this thing called milkweed, which, for those of you that don't know, it's like a tall, stocky plant that has these green, like oblong leaves that are kind of large. And when you break them off, this milky kind of sap comes running out. And if you let it go far enough, it'll have these really beautiful kind of dusty pink flowers, and they smell amazing. They're so good. Not much eats that plant because its sap is actually toxic to other things. So the little monarch caterpillar that starts out literally like the size of my eye pupil, right? It hatches out, eats a bunch of this plant, molts, eats some more, molts again, eats some more. Anyway, it continues this process. I think it's like 4 different molts that it goes through before it goes into a chrysalis, which my daughters and I had the privilege a couple of years ago. Every single year, what we would do is go out, scour the local milkweed plants for either these eggs that look like tiny, tiny pearls, or if we saw a caterpillar that we could just kind of pluck off and bring it home, we would put it in this special little butterfly terrarium that we had, and we would pick a bunch of milkweed, put it into a big pot inside the little terrarium so the caterpillar could crawl in, but I'd stick it, like I'd put saran wrap and poke the milkweed into it so that the caterpillars didn't drop down into the vase and die. I was very careful about that part. And then we would put a bunch of the leaves inside the fridge because once, a frost came or once it started to get cooler, the plants would die back, and I always wanted to have enough food on hand. And we would hatch out, one year I think we hatched out 30 of these, or 32 monarch butterflies, and each one was this beautiful chrysalis that was about an inch long, and right along the middle it had this incredible like gold. It literally looked like it just looked like gold, like somebody had taken a paintbrush, dipped it in gold leaf, and painted right around the center. And it always blew my mind because these caterpillars would go through all these molts, which first of all can't be fun. I have no idea. Nature's just, it blows my mind. But they go through these molts. Then right before it's ready for the chrysalis stage, it goes and hangs upside down, and it hangs in a J for anybody that hasn't seen it before. And then it's like you see it, it's a caterpillar hanging upside down, and then all of a sudden, one moment you look at it and it's not a caterpillar anymore, it's a chrysalis, and it's this beautiful mint green with that gold edge around the middle of it, and you can't see anything inside at first. It's just a beautiful minty green, and it hangs there. And then every day we would watch it, and every day we would see little changes, like the wings, the patterns of the monarch butterfly would start to become visible through the chrysalis, until one day we'd come out, and they typically always hatched in the early morning. We'd come out, and there they would be, like fanning their wings, trying to pump all the blood and the juices through them, and to be able to, fly around and find the nectar and the things that they needed in order to be on their way. And it was such a special thing to do with my girls. I feel so lucky that we had that chance. But anyhow, as I'm going out there, at the places that we've left these stands, like literally stands that are, some of them, it's clumps here and there, but we have like a 1/4 acre, I think, of just pure milkweed down by the pond. And I didn't see a single one on there. Not one. And my heart hurts so bad about that. Are you guys seeing any of these decreases? Have you noticed that there are less monarch butterflies than ever? In particular, this year was really bad, and I don't know why, because it seemed to be a great year for other things. Like we had a ton of crickets, we had some cicadas, lots of other insects all around. Japanese beetles, the normal insects in our garden. And as our soil is getting healthier, I'm seeing things come back to life, and lots of pests are coming to eat those plants that are more nourished. Their Brix level is higher. They've got more nutrients to offer, and things are drawn to them. So if you have deer eating your garden, it's a compliment. You're doing a good job. But I just can't get over it. It hurts me that they're not there, and I don't know what to do about that, but I'm just sitting with this grief. And so I was thinking about how we as a culture can make peace with things like that. How we can possibly communicate about that to our children. I hope we never have to say, the last monarch went extinct, and you'll have to take my word for it. It was beautiful and magical and all sorts of stuff. But it hurts me that we may not have these things around us and living our lives with us. And they each have something so beautiful to teach us and something really powerful to tell us about transformation, about how we can grow and change and bring beauty and function to the world in a way that is wonderful. And so I've been really struggling with that. And what is upsetting about it is that I can go into our feed store and there are so many neonicotinoids and other pesticides and herbicides lining the walls of the feed store that anybody can buy. I could just go in there and get a truckload, as many as I could carry or purchase, and bring them home and spray them all over my field, and nobody cares. And yet, in this country, we're busy harping on things that don't really matter and taking away people's right to things that just doesn't seem to make logical sense to me. Like, I'm a person that cares as much as anyone about our planet and about its critters and about leaving a world behind that my children can appreciate and enjoy, and that your children can appreciate and enjoy. But I just hate the way that they're shoving things down our throat around, stopping eating meat because eating meat is the cause of all the problems. Or I don't know, I'm sure you can think of a million of them off the top of my head. There are just a couple that come to mind, but there's so many ways that they're making our lives smaller and more constrained because they know that there aren't enough resources. They being the elites, I think, in this story. And so they're going to convince you that for climate change, you need to do X, Y, and Z. And if you don't, then all the suffering that results is on you. And, it's gross. They're shaming us into changing our life in a way that benefits them, because they still get to, fly their private jets all around and do whatever they want. They just don't want us to do that. So I take issue with that, but I am very much an environmentalist, somebody who cares about, human ecology, humans interacting with, the wild world and all of that. And so it feels really serious to me that this is happening, that our insects are going away, that our monarch butterflies are no more, despite seemingly having habitat around here. And the only thing I can think of is that, in addition to whatever they're spraying above us, that it has to be from something we've done, some kind of chemical or pollution or plastic, or, who knows? But anyway, so as I was grappling with this today, I had kind of an emotional morning. I was thinking about it, and I was realizing that there's somebody who I really trust to talk about grief, and I thought I would pull him in. So in case somebody listening to this has not heard of him before, check out a man named Stephen Jenkinson. He is an incredible storyteller. He's worked pretty much extensively with dying people, like in palliative care, in people that are sort of at the brink of, going from this life to the next. And he's also just really well versed in history and understanding cultural things. And he actually has his own school where he tries to help share a space with people in order to create a conversation about how to sit with these emotions that come up, how to be with these really big ideas that are difficult to work with. And in general, every time I've heard him, he does a lot of podcasts as well, so you could certainly find him there if you look on YouTube. But he's kind of allergic to the ways that we've gotten accustomed as a culture or as humans to making things all nice and tidy and sound good, when there's really no reason to find the upside of something. Like, the inability to kind of let it be what it is. He's very good at pointing that out. And when people ask questions like, let me see if I can find one, like, what should I do to get ready for dying? He's like, oh, you're missing the point. Like, he believes that it's a whole belief system that has to change. It's not like getting the right answer to a question and then you won't have any suffering and it'll all be fine. Like, he doesn't tell it like that. And I'll let him share more of his message with you in his own words. But he's got a couple books. And he also has a short film named Grief Walker. I think he made another one more recently in the last couple of years. I can't recall the name of it, but he also wrote a book called Die Wise, which is a manifesto for sanity and the soul. And that is incredible. It's all about really growing into becoming an elder and what that means, which isn't related to age necessarily. It's related to sort of taking on the burdens of your culture and carrying them so the younger generations don't have to. And he also talks a lot about money, which is interesting. I haven't read this particular book and I should. It's called Money and the Soul's Desires. And I think it speaks to our obsession with money, our misunderstanding about what money is. And he talks about how it evolved over, millennia to be what it is at this point in our lives, at least in this culture. And he's just incredible. So anyway, he's writing a new book called To Mother Culture, Patrimony, Matrimony, and Ceremony, which I'm looking forward to reading. I can't wait. But he says, having a conscience is a grief-soaked proposition, which I think we could extrapolate to mean lots of other things, or many things. But he's saying that to be alive and awake at this point, to really be present with your life, with what's in it, with what you feel called to in terms of what's right and what's not, and to be in integrity with yourself. It's not all feel good and fluffy and all's well that ends well. It's compelling. It's daunting. It's painful and full of sorrow sometimes, and that's okay. And I like that he expresses it that way. And so he's so wonderful at sharing these things that I thought, rather than just share one little small sentence, I would read a little excerpt from something he said in an interview, actually with Chris. He did this interview, and he speaks like some people write. He's just able to articulate things so beautifully. And his words distill these thoughts down. And he also breaks words apart and tries to understand their etymology, which is the root of the word, and what it actually historically is meant, which helps us get a better grasp of what the definition could be, which I think is a little bit malleable if I understand it correctly. With, in terms of his teaching, he talks a lot about how things have changed over time, and some of the meaning of the words get lost, at least as we use them in our modern world. And so he brings that information back in, which is beautiful. But he says, the hearing in the popular culture goes something like this: get good at grief so you can get on the other side of it, so you don't have to do it anymore. That's what getting good at grief is. Even like having a good relationship with this grief, so it won't bite you in the ass too badly kind of thing. I'm saying that grief is, in and of itself, a skillfulness of being a human being. It is not something you have a relationship with. It is that which, in a deeply disciplined way, you practice. You're partly being pursued by it at times, both of which has hopefully the purpose of a deep kind of introduction that you cannot turn away from again, because it has made a claim upon you and has the order of necessity about it, not the order of affliction. So it's not a matter of declawing and defanging grief until it sits quietly in your lap like a poodle. Not at all. Nope. Grief is a human-scaled mystery. That's what it is. In medieval times, in Northern Europe in particular, in the monastic life, There are stations that you awaken through the course of the evening, deep into the night and into the early dawn, where you are at different layers of prayer and contemplation and so on. I am told that one of the contemplative exercises for those people in that time was to say in a kind of chanting fashion a Latin term, lacrimae rerum, which translates fairly readily for us as the tears that are in all things. They would not say it in order to dry the tears that are in all things. Excuse me. They would say it so that it could be known that the deep facts of life require endings in order for things to proceed. This insight visits human beings as an awareness of your end before your end actually comes. The possibility of you deepening your life as a direct consequence of realizing how fundamentally limited it is in time and in consequence and in impact. What life is often tormenting, broken, a place where, as my countryman who has recently died said, a crack where the light gets in, and that's it. So, to be deeply tolerant of limits essentially dooms you to a project of unrestrained, unfettered, and untethered growth. If your project is to live a mutually nourishing life, then to be restrained in that regard is to be disciplined so that your capacities serve something. And in doing so, you recognize how much on the receiving end of being served you have been, which of course, what our childhood is for. And the ending of our childhood is often accomplished by recognizing how deeply on the take we have been without even realizing it. And sometimes you get to live long enough where you can turn to your parent and you can say, I'm sorry, I had no idea for the longest time. And of course, your parent would probably say, yeah, I know. And there it is at the level of family. Well, what kind of planetary being can we turn to now and say, I'm sorry, I had no idea? That's so profound. His musings about what it means to take full individual responsibility really touched my heart, really helped me to think more deeply about the decisions I make every day in my life, the things that might be out of alignment or out of integrity. You know, sometimes it's the unknown, like you purchase something that is the cheapest and that feels like the right thing for you as a person, as a consumer, as a family member trying to provide for everyone that you love. And, you know, only God will judge, I think, in the end, whether or not that really was the right thing, or if you were hurting somebody halfway across the world that had made that item in a sweatshop, therefore it was able to be purchased at such a low price. I mean, on and on, right? It's hard to know where to draw that line. And I think in our culture, at least in New England, part of what I experienced when we lived out in closer to it's still the western part of the state, but where Chris and I lived before in the Happy Valley, it was happy, but it was also, there was a lot of sort of virtue signaling going on and people trying to outdo one another as far as how spiritual they were or how progressive. And, you know, I give my kids organic food. Do you? Like, it was just this weird, I don't know, it was a competition instead of doing it for the sake of doing it. And that just was, I'm allergic to that. I hate that. But anyway, I wanted to leave that with you as an invitation and to myself, because I know there are always ways that we can change and grow and become more conscious of our lives and how they impact other people. And I believe that we're here to be in service to each other more than anything. I don't think we're meant to be accumulating things and having this soft, cushy life, and that's the end. I think the deeper meaning comes from when we can be of service to our fellow humans and when we can just get to the end and be all used up. You know what I mean? Like days where I get to fall into bed feeling like I've used every bit of what I have towards the day, towards the animals or garden or whatever, the house, to Chris, it feels different. And I want to feel like that at the end of my life too. I want to be all used up. And the last thing I wanted to say and leave you with is this. It's from I haven't seen the movie actually. It's called Shall We Dance? And I was thinking about what I could do in my small little space to make the world better. And I was like, you know what? I can be witness. That's one thing I can do. And it doesn't take that much more effort. It's practice for sure. And to really listen to other people when they're sharing, to open my heart and be present for whatever creature I'm sitting or standing in front of or being with, you know, whether it's my cats or my chickens or my cows or my garden or the trees or, you know, our neighbor Norm or our close friends that live nearby. It doesn't matter. I think it's really important though that I bring my whole heart to those beings. And so I wanted to leave this with you as a result. It's from the movie Shall We Dance? It says, we need a witness to our lives. There's 1 billion people on the planet. I mean, what does any one life really mean? But in a marriage, you're promising to care about everything, the good things, the bad things, the terrible things, the mundane things. All of it, all the time, every day. You're saying, your life will not go unnoticed because I will notice it. Your life will not go unwitnessed because I will be your witness. So, as I get ready for saying something like that to Chris, those words are especially poignant to me, and I appreciate you letting me share them with you. And I hope there was something in here today that you are able to pull from that's going to nourish you in your life. And I am hoping that we can be faithful witness to each other. I look forward to hearing your stories. I read your comments. I look forward to having more of this conversation with you and for us to get to know each other and to witness each other, to truly witness each other in this one wild and precious life. Thanks for joining me today. Until next week. Bye.